All right, and welcome. It is our another virtual happy hour. I'm Greg Vol, your host. Welcome to Virtual Happy Hour. It's an exciting day. We have one day left of the weekend, and it's just going to be great. We have a great guest show up on the show today. Before we get into that, I want to remind you that we are celebrating Untapped Month. We are turning 10 years old on October 22nd, and we're having a lot of fun, exciting things going on within our app and within our company. We want to share with you specifically our anniversary party event. Typically, we hold these parties all over the country, but unfortunately, with COVID going on, we're doing it all virtual this year, which is great because everyone gets a chance to actually attend virtually. So check us out on October 24th from 3 p.m. to 6 p.m. Eastern. We're having an awesome party that we want you to attend to. And we're also having an exclusive badge for the event as well. Check out all the details at untapped.com/10, as well as our new beer project we're working with Dogfish Head for I Remember My First Check-In, a great beer to celebrate the anniversary, available in your local markets by anyone who wants to brew it. Once again, check out untapped.com/10 for all the details. And with that, I want to bring on my guest for today of the show, Dr. J. Jackson-Beckham. Thank you so much for being part of us, and welcome to the show.
Hey, Greg. Thank you for having me.
Awesome. Very exciting stuff. We've known each other over on the Twitter webs for a long time. We've done some group talks together. And I'm glad to have you and I having a virtual happy hour tonight. So I'm super excited that you're with us. But like any other happy hour, the most important part of what we do is a beer. So I want to throw it over to you, Dr. J. What are you drinking in your glass tonight?
Yeah, I am drinking a kickstand pale ale. Wait, am I doing it wrong? There we go.
You're doing it right. You're good.
It's my influencer hand. Right from Icicle Brewing out on the West Coast. And as always, I have some appropriate glassware.
Nice.
So, yeah, I love just a clean, balanced pale ale. It's just one of my favorite things to drink. This one is, I think it's kind of a little bit unique. Like they bitter hop it with Warrior, so it's just got a nice kind of balance but bracing hop bitterness, and then it's got some flavor aroma hops from Citra. So
very cool. And on my side of the table, what I'm having today, this is MC Squared from Equilibrium up in Middletown, New York. I'm a huge fan of all the beers they make. Look at the artwork on that; it's pretty epic. I've had this beer before, but whenever you get a chance to try this again, I'm all for it. So we want to know what you're drinking out there. If you're drinking right now, use the comments on YouTube, Twitter, or Facebook, and tell us what you're drinking. Or you can use a really cool app called Untapped. No bias there. You can check in your beer there, and we'll let it on the Untapped at home venue. So we'll crack open our beers right now. If you have one in your hand, make sure you crack it open. I'm going to go for my glass approach. Maybe I'll get the pour right this time because I've been pretty poor with my pours. No pun intended there, but looks like it's going okay this time. All righty. Got it. All right. Oh, look at your pour is great. I think I did an okay job, but cheers to everyone. Dr. J, cheers to you, and thanks for being part of the show. Enjoy your beverage.
Awesome.
Awesome. Very, very good. Well, let's get right into it. Obviously, we talked a little bit about you. Obviously, we put your lower third up on the screen and what you do for your new initiative for Crafted for All. But obviously, that's a big topic of what everything in the industry now is, especially with the equity and inclusion. Give me a little flavor of how you got into this business. And I know that you have other roles, well, with the Brewers Association, but how did this come to be as a strategist for these things and being consulting for these inclusion programs, not just for beer, but for the rest of the markets as well?
Yeah. A lot of people are like, how'd you do this? And I like to joke, but not really joke, that I've been like training for this my whole life. So, I've been a huge craft beer fan, enthusiast since the late 90s. I lived in San Diego in the early 2000s, which was not a trashy place to live for beer at that time. And I was a sponge. I did the thing that so many of the viewers will probably have done as well, where you just get hooked and you're just trying to do anything, attend to anything, learn everything. So I had a really awesome spate of years where I was just, doing anything craftier I could do, including homebrewing. And when I went to graduate school at the University of North Carolina to do my PhD, I was working this homebrew shop to kind of, make ends meet, and, was studying for BJCP and doing all this beer stuff. And so I had kind of like half of my head was always on beer and half of my head was always on academic stuff. And then I just had this moment where I was like, I am going to write my doctoral dissertation on beer because it just made sense. So after a lot of people told me I couldn't do that, I did it anyway. And I'm a communication and cultural studies scholar. And so one of the big things that just kind of kept coming up over and over again was like all of these social parts of the industry, whether we're talking about, the time pre-prohibition or over the mid-century years or during the kind of rise of, micro and then craft. There were always these kind of issues of culture and identity kind of wrapped up in the way that American beer has unfolded and been a product. And I was always just fascinated by that. But, it was really patently obvious that it was also like pretty much everyone except for white men were well underrepresented, at least in the contemporary craft movement. And as someone who was just passionately in love with craft beer and with the folks associated with it, like it kind of hurt me, like I was like, why don't I see anybody that looks like me? Like this is such an awesome space and these are awesome people. Like I want to fix this, So it took me a while. I started a career as a college professor and taught at a couple schools and lost my life. And, I was still doing research on the industry and that was really awesome. But, finally got this opportunity through some of my writing and some of the things I was doing in terms of like putting my academic work out there. Some people in the industry took notice and were like, hey, this is kind of interesting. You might be onto something. And so, I would say some of the people who kind of early took notice, Colin out at Hen House, he had a podcast for a while and I appeared on that. And in 2017, I spoke at the North Carolina Craft Brewers Conference, which is actually where I met Julia Hertz and, eventually kind of formed a relationship with the Brewers Association. But it was a really winding road, through academia. And just this spring, I was like, well, I love being an academic. I get to do research, I get to teach, and I get to do, service to the greater good. And what the realization I kind of came to is I was doing all of that for the craft beer industry, and I was enjoying it a lot more than I was enjoying being in higher ed. So, so turned my attention to the craft beer space full time as of the beginning of 2020, and it's been a crazy ride. 2020,
It's like, you have such good aspirations for the year for 2020, and then it's completely gone by the drain from that perspective. But you mentioned something in that conversation about your work with the BA and wanted to kind of, evolve on that. How did that get started, and what is the actual kind of work that you do with them now, being their ambassador for diversity and inclusion?
Yeah. So, so it did get started. I met Julia Hertz, and I was a massive fan of hers already. I think I quote her like 47 times in my dissertation. If you look in the back pages, you'll be like Hertz. So, and there's this great moment. We were at Foothills, and it was like an after party or something. We're in the back. They set up their production space with some catering, and Julia kind of walks up to me, and she comes up to like hear on everyone because she's just like a little spark plug of a person. And she asked me this question. She's like, yeah, I heard your talk today. It was great. What are you going to do with that? And I just remember being like, what? What do you mean? What do you mean? What am I going to do with it? But it kind of started me thinking like, yeah, maybe there is something here, right? Like something to do, some work to be done. And so several months later, somebody passed along to me the fact that the BA was looking for an ambassador. And when, I talked to them about what they were looking for, they were specifically looking for someone who could teach and make educational materials, for somebody who could do research and interpret data, right? And somebody who was comfortable speaking to groups. And I was like, yeah, that's literally exactly what I do. So it was a pretty good match from the start. So predominantly what I do is I write and create best practice materials for their membership. And I give keynote addresses, seminars, talks at mostly at State Brewers Guild conferences, but also CBC, Homebrew Con. So you'll see me at some of those things too. And then we just do programming. So we launched a grant program. We're working on a mentoring program right now. So programming around equity and inclusion as well.
Fantastic. Awesome stuff. Well, if you're watching out there and you have a question for Dr. J, we'd love to hear from you. Use YouTube, Twitter, or Facebook, wherever you're watching this. Enter a comment, and we'll try to get it up on the screen here. This question just came in. Is from RT Barstool. It said, what's the best way for breweries to promote diversity and inclusion virtually during the pandemic? You probably get this question asked a lot, but I think the key part about this is the virtually, because not everybody can do things in person now.
Yeah, that's right. So I kind of think there's two answers I'll give to this question. One, because a lot of breweries are having to, scale back some of their outreach, scale back some of their customer interactions. This is a really great time to start looking inward, right? And looking at your own policies. So what's your hiring and recruitment look like? Are you doing any pipeline development to make sure that the greatest number of people in the skilled labor force in your area are applying and know that you're a potential employer? That's a huge problem with a lot of people just not being aware that their craft brewery is a source of career-oriented employment. I think another thing you can do while you are interacting virtually is use this time again when you're not, out there shaking hands and looking at people face to face to like extend some invitations, right? Meet your community, meet those people, meet that neighborhood association, meet that church group, meet that service group. Make some connections and start building some relationships. It's awkward to do it sometimes face to face. So in a strange way, having to do things virtually sometimes takes away a little bit of the awkwardness of going out and meeting people in those ways. So, use that time wisely. I would absolutely take a look at your external communications. They're super important right now, whether that's your social or a newsletter or things along that. And do a little audit of your social and say, wow, are we kind of showing the community like the breadth of who we are? Are we engaging the people who are having a relationship with our brand or with our products? And can we give people an opportunity to represent themselves and see themselves in our brand, in our spaces, and in this relationship?
Yeah, I mean, it's a great question and a great answer too. But I think that a lot of times, we use the word community a lot in your response there. And I think we all kind of picture beer as a very communal product. We're doing it together, whether we're not physically there with each other, we're doing it communally. But a lot of breweries and a lot of restaurants and bar owners may not look at it from that perspective. And I think that when you look at hiring the right people, talking about things, it's important. And that kind of leads into another question about, why do you think that the beer industry is so communal? And we have a lot of these major organizations in other areas, like for example, Pepsi and Coke are never going to come together and actually make a drink, but they'll do that in other aspects, in brewing. So what makes brewing or the beer so communal and bring people together, why it's so important to do the things that you mentioned?
Yeah. Some of it is like, there's tons of historical precedent. And I think if you reach out into the group of kind of beer scholars out in the world, Brewed Culture, Chicago Museum, all those folks, Maureen Ogle, what you'll see is that like there have been these communal social practices built around both the making and consumption of beer for centuries and across continents, which is really kind of amazing, right? We just have this built-in cultural memory that we're supposed to have beer together and communally, and like in public houses, right? In pubs, it's part of public life, and I think that's pretty remarkable. But I think another piece of this is, in particular, the way that craft breweries have evolved in the United States, right? 85% of drinking age adults live within 10 miles of a craft brewery. So, it's taking on the kind of geography of your daily supplier, right? Like the way bakeries used to be, like you head over there and you get your loaf and it's right there. So I think in some ways, the way that that side of the industry has evolved over the last 20 years has made it a really, right place to kind of think about community. The way that we think about financing small breweries, I think in a lot of ways leans on certain types of community financing rather than, huge amounts of bank financing or investor financing. So there's just a lot of different aspects of beer, particularly contemporary beer, that has pushed it into the community.
Absolutely. Well, if you joined us late, we're talking with Dr. J. Jackson-Beckham, who's an equity and inclusion strategic at Crafted for All. And if you have a question for Dr. J, and we'd love to hear from you, put it in the comment section, whether it's on YouTube, Facebook, or Twitter, and we'd love to see if we can get that on there as well. Let's change gears a little bit here, Dr. J. You mentioned before that you homebrewed. How did that all start? And do you continue to homebrew now, even with everything that's going on in the world?
Yeah. So I started homebrewing in 2007, I believe, when I was living in the West Coast. And, gosh, it was, I feel like now that I think about it, think back on it, that first cobbled together homebrew kit, it was just such this incredible frontier. I am going to make beer. I think the first thing, I don't remember, my partner at the time, I think we either made a pumpkin beer or some kind of malty amber or something I probably wouldn't brew today, but I think those were the first beers. And I don't know, right? I definitely had Charlie's book, first edition, right? And that was so accessible and warm. It had all this great illustrations, and Charlie's such a welcoming, friendly personality in that regard. And I just was hooked. So, I've moved, maybe 4 times since then. And every time I move, it is more homebrew crap, So now I have these massive wooden stands, hybrid electric system, 2 fridges to ferment in. My homebrew is a whole room of itself.
That's legit right there.
Yeah, and right now it's legit living in my backyard because I have to build a structure for it. So I have not brewed since I moved this spring. I haven't brewed since the old place, but I still have an alt beer in a carboy that's hanging out until I can put it in a keg. So
awesome. Well, obviously, home brewing, you must have a style preference. And we talked a little bit before about how every beer lover likes every type of style. But what is your preferred style from your perspective? Is it seasonal? Is it environmental, where things kind of trigger you to go where? Or you walk into a brewery, obviously in a pre-COVID world, what's that style that you're going to look for to try for the first time?
Yeah, well, I'm a super seasonal drinker. So definitely I'm looking for time of year. What am I eating? What's the temperature outside? As a home brewer, I will say I brew a lot of Saison because I live in Virginia and Saison likes it hot. So I'm there you go. Do your thing, yeast, you're happy. So that's maybe a lazy response, but you get good products if you work with the environment you're in. So I love that. I love dry stuff. So I brew with a lot of rye. So if I'm out and about and I'm traveling, if you have a beer that's features a good amount of rye in the grist, I'll probably buy that because I'm just intrigued by that type of thing. I've really been getting into table beers lately. I think no and low is a really interesting trend right now, and I'm definitely here for it. I'm in my 40s, right? Not getting
I'm with you on that
one. I need to kind of back away from some of the big stuff. So table beers that are complex and subtle, but hold up to food and are interesting to drink, but won't hammer you, are really interesting to me right now. So
fantastic. Well, we're talking about styles. This is a great question just got answered by Louis. What style of beer do you believe will blow up in popularity over the next 3 to 5 years? This is another one of those $1 million questions that if we could figure this out, then all the breweries would go for it. But what's your kind of gut check on what's happening within kind of the styles that are getting popularity?
Gosh, this is the hardest question. One, because I'm also a little bit of a get off my lawn curmudgeon. So whatever I call is probably going to be dead wrong. But I do think no and low is really interesting right now, particularly because we're seeing data about craft consumers or any beer consumers that says they're looking for beers that are going to kind of resonate with a sense of health consciousness. Now, they're drinking seltzer for the same reason, and there's a lot of argument to be made about why seltzer is not healthy. But if if there are kind of reasons people are making that choice, I think both lighter bodied and lower ABV I think those are trends that people are really working on. I think, we ran on one the last time I kind of did a talk with you. I think CBD and cannabis are really interesting propositions right now, particularly in the beer space. And I'm definitely keeping my eye on that. I think that's just a really interesting space to maybe go in. And I think as much as I keep thinking like we cannot innovate the IPA anymore, right? Like we've beat it to death. We put lactose in it. We put in smoothie sheen. Like, we took all the sugar out. We made a brew, and then we, put a bunch of de-bittered, carafa in there. And we made it black. Like I feel like there's nothing we can do to IPA anymore. And then I'm gonna be wrong, right? Like we're gonna do something else to the IPA. So I would say maybe those are my trends. No and low, CBD cannabis, and like just keep trucking on that IPA.
It's funny that you mentioned that because I'm in the same boat as you about IPAs and how it can't be innovated anymore. But I know the minute I say that, there's going to be something that comes out tomorrow that is literally innovating the IPA more, and it'll be a hit. And I think that I'm more interested in the no and low area in that space. We talked to great brewers like Athletic on this show a few times, just understanding a little bit about how they're going after the non-alcoholic space there. It's just amazing to me because I think that, beer has transcended a lot of people's conversations. It used to be like, the college days, what's the highest you can get? I want to get the drunkest fast, and now it's turned into, like you said, I'm getting older now too. And I look at these things. I love the taste, but I don't drink it to get, buzzed or wasted anymore. It's about that flavor. You can get that flavor in these non-alcoholic and low alcohol beers and not have the side effects of having too many of these from that perspective. And that's pretty amazing. Non-alcoholic beers to me was like the old Duels Nation in the back in the old days. My grandfather used to drink this stuff, but like it didn't have any flavor, and now it does. So like, what will that change from a consumer perspective? I don't know. It really is interesting market for sure.
Yeah, absolutely. And I would say there's obviously a ton of energy in like sours and spontaneously fermented beers. And for me, this is it's like hit or miss, right? But like there are some people doing some things with, particularly in the spontaneous fermented space, that are so interesting, like just dead interesting. And I really hope to see people just keep innovating in that space as well.
Sounds great. Well, let's get back to the Crafted for All. It's a great question again from RT Barstool. How did you come up with the Crafted for All commitment? Maybe explaining what that is if people hadn't heard of what that commitment actually is. Yeah.
So funny story. When I took the position as Diversity Ambassador for the BA, I did a lot of listening the first 6 months to a year, and I did a lot of speaking at guild events and nationally. And one of the pieces of really excellent criticism that I received was like, I understand what you're saying. You've made a really wonderful case for the importance of doing this, but like, you haven't given me any tangible things to do. Right? And for me, that was 100% intentional, right? I say that like diversity in Montana looks different than diversity in Atlanta. So you can't do the same thing. A brewery that has 1,000 employees and a brewery that has 10 employees have different capacity. They can't do the same thing. So I've always been a proponent of this idea that there's no one size fits all solution to kind of reaching your equity and inclusion goals. But when you hear a criticism enough, like you have to kind of look at it and say, okay, there's truth in there that I have to be willing to hear. And for me, the truth was, you have to do better. You have to get closer to something that gives people something they can at least tangibly hold on to and start taking steps. So I spent some time developing the Crafted for All commitment. It's 20 action items, and they're scalable. So no matter what size brewery, what format of brewery you are, you can scale these action items to fit your organization. They cross 7 areas of organizational practice, so everything from your cultural climate to your external communications to your hiring policy. And the commitment is simply an opportunity for craft beverage organizations, whether they're breweries, cideries, distributors, allied trade associations, to kind of publicly make a commitment to say, we are going to invest in working toward these 20 action items. So it's not a promise you're going to do them all at once or that you're going to be 100% successful, but that you are actively working on making your way through that list. And then that group of folks, their logos are featured at craftedforall.com/commit. So you can see what companies have made this commitment, and they receive a newsletter that's really about sharing tactics among them. So what's working, what's success, so we can all be kind of a community and lift each other up.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's a great thing to have, and I'm glad that we had a chance to talk about that piece today, because I think, the nail on the head for me as a member of the industry, whether it's in a technology space or just a consumer, is that you can't really compare 2 breweries in different geographical areas with the same measuring stick. There's different things that happen, like you mentioned in Montana, that don't happen in Atlanta or Georgia, any other area from that perspective. So having that ability to kind of scale with this makes it easier for people to say, how can I actually take the words you're saying and implement them within my organization? We've talked about this numerous times in the show where, we want these long lasting effects of these things for diversity and inclusion within any type of organization, not just social posts and the things that people say all the time, but actionable items that they can say we're making a difference. And that's got to feel good from your perspective. It's putting together something like that. People look at, say, okay, I've got my plan of attack now. I'm going to go out and do it. It's got to feel rewarding on your side.
Yeah, I think so. I mean, it's, this work is so complicated, right? I mean, there are days when I'm like, especially when I spend too much time on Twitter. And there are days when, I literally kind of weep for joy because I'm like, this is so cool because, this is materially changing people's lives for the better, and that's awesome. And for me, maybe one of the best things going on right now, even though as a country and as an industry, we're coming through some really challenging months and weeks here. One of the things that I think is so incredible is that there's now a really awesome, supportive community of people doing this work also, right? Beer culture out there doing amazing work. Garrett, starting the Michael Jackson Foundation, amazing work. Ren Navarro up in Toronto doing things, and we have this community of people kind of all putting their energy towards affecting change kind of in their spheres and not being alone in doing that. Teo and Benny, Pounds and Hops out there doing atrial pills, right? It's just the kind of critical mass of energy towards this effort, which I genuinely believe isn't about, special programs for special people. For me, this is really about improving the experience of this industry for everybody who's involved in it. And man, is that a beautiful vision, right?
I mean, I think, we had talked previously about, your initial assessment of this industry was, I'm going to focus on doing this stuff within the craft space. But I'd love to hear your thoughts on not outside the craft world, where you've been able to see the same type of things play out and the same type of concepts need to be obtained. We in the beer world and are kind of almost like tunnel vision, like, oh my God, this needs to change. But it's happening on all industries, as you probably have seen. And, that's why you've kind of expanded your brand from that perspective.
Yeah, absolutely. And there's so much to learn, right? So right now I'm working with, the Virginia wine industry, working with the folks nationwide in the cider industry. Honestly, craft has always been kind of where my heart lies. But I think if you look at things like, the draft quality manual that's, published by the Brewers Association, there's a lot of input from brewers that are not craft, because they have developed a tremendous amount of expertise and they have
Right.
a tremendous amount of resources to put towards, some of the challenges that we face as an industry. So, for me, I'm like, hey, like big multinational beer company that has a rock star, HR specialist and lots of staff. Let's chat, right? Like let's compare notes, because we only get better when we share expertise.
Absolutely. Well, Dr. Dre, it's been an amazing time talking with you about this stuff here. And I'm super excited to find more about all your stuff at Crafted for All. I think it's a great initiative. I think that this is like you mentioned, a crazy time for both America as a whole, but just in general with inclusion and diversity with anything people are doing. So I thank you so much for being part of the show, and want to give you an opportunity to kind of tell people where they can find you, whether it's on social media or where they can find more things about Crafted for All.
Yeah, that's great. Thank you so much. Yeah, so you can find me online. My Twitter account is Jackson-Beckham, and that's generally tweets about like my garden and like knitting. Basically, it's not where I do all the beer takes. Crafted for All on Twitter, Instagram, LinkedIn, Facebook is where you can follow information about Crafted for All, the consultancy. We also have a Patreon community for as little as $1 a month. You can be part of a community of like-minded folks. For higher tiers, you get things like resources, downloadables, right? Live chats, discounts on educational products. So definitely check that out. That's at patreon.com, Crafted for All. And then I also have a nonprofit organization called Craft by EDU, and we're trying to support folks who are looking to join the beverage industry from a career perspective through education and professional development. So that's Craft by EDU. The by is an X. So craftbyedu.org. You can find details online, and would love your support. Would love to see you out whenever it's safe for us to have events again.
Absolutely. Well, thank you, Dr. J, so much for your time tonight, and thank you for being part of this.
Awesome. Take care, Greg.
Cheers. Awesome. Well, thank you everybody for watching our show this Thursday. Hope you had a great time talking about all the great things for Crafted for All. Coming up next week, we've gone to the UK, but this time we're going a little bit different. We're going to the land up north, Canada. Tomorrow is actually Canadian Thanksgiving, and to celebrate all next week, Tuesday, Wednesday, and Thursday, we're going to have Canadian breweries guests on the show, just like we did for the UK week. We're having people from Collective Arts. We're having people from a Blind Enthusiasm Brewing Company and some other celebrities to be involved. Check out untapped.com/TV for all the updates on what's happening for our new shows coming out there. And I hope to see you next week, Tuesday, Wednesday, and Thursday. Thank you so much for watching. I'm Greg from Untapped. Good night, everybody.